Good morning, everyone. As we have folks coming in, I'd like to welcome you to the Culpeper Chamber of Commerce's 2021 Legislative Conference. I'm Jeff Say, President and CEO of the Culpeper Chamber of Commerce. And we'd like to thank our signature sponsor, Germanna Community College, and event sponsors Culpeper Media Network and Culpeper Star Experiment. Today, members of our community will have an opportunity to connect with legislators as they prepare to go into general session. Our panelists today will be able to discuss important issues that will impact Culpeper and the surrounding areas with our legislators. We'll hear from representatives from education, economic development, workforce development, healthcare, and environment. And then the legislators will have an opportunity to address attendees. It's always important to connect with our legislators, but that has become even more imperative as we've been facing a pandemic for nearly 2 years now. We hope this session is informative for both our legislators and our attendees, and we look forward to positive discussion. I'd like to thank Senator Emmett, 24th District, Senator Bryce Reeves, 17th District, Senator Jill Vogel, the 27th District, Delegate Nick Freitas, 30th District, and Delegate Michael Weber, 18th District, for joining us today and for their continued service to our area. Now, I will turn it over to our signature sponsor, Germanna Community College, and their representative, Dr. Patty Lisk, the Dean of Health Technologies, to speak about education. Dr. Lisk has not joined us yet, so we will actually just go to Brian Rothamel, who is going to be discussing economic development. Brian is the new director of Culpeper County Economic Development, and he is going to discuss economic development legislation. Brian, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff, and thank you to our legislators and the opportunity to get to speak to you about some legislative priorities that are affecting Culpeper County and rural Virginia in general. Get started. So thank you. So we're going to discuss the economic development legislative priorities. The Virginia Economic Developers Association Board of Directors sets the public policy for the association. I now sit on the board of directors for VEDA. And our slogan is economic development is everyone's business. We see in general across the country that economic development projects typically go to urban areas. However, rural localities are the key to Virginia keeping pace with large economic development projects. We saw this recently this week with the announcement of Toyota going to North Carolina. We've seen Ford going to Tennessee and Kentucky, and then all the projects that Texas has been winning lately. Those are significantly sized projects. They will not be able to fit in the urban crescent of Virginia. So we really need to look at what we can do to help our rural localities in the Commonwealth. And there's 3 priorities that I most wanted to point out. We have the Virginia Business Ready Sites Program, the Virginia Talent Accelerator Program, and then funding for the Virginia Jobs Investment Program. The Virginia Business Ready Sites is a grant program that helps lower the cost of development of 100+ acre sites. The current fiscal year, we have funding for $7 million for all of the Commonwealth. Previously, the last fiscal year was 0, and before that was 1 million. So over the course of 3 years, we've spent $8 million on site development. Virginia Economic Development Partnership believes we need 150 one-time budget appropriation to really catch up on sites. Now that's going to take us a few fiscal years to spend $150 million. And then after that, we're going to need 20 million annually to make sure that we have these larger sites and these sites ready for development. Currently, Culpeper has a Go Virginia Sites project that is making one of our sites more desirable. But if we can get more funding into site development, we're really going to see the success and the availability. We might have the land, but we're not necessarily ready for the development to begin. The Virginia Talent Accelerator Program is an incentive offered by the state. Now this goes towards workforce. It's a turnkey customized training program that VDP provides to the company. And the way they deliver this is through the local community college system in the area that the company has selected. Now what happens is the company will decide they're coming to Virginia, and then VDP starts working on that training program. The training program has enabled companies that thought they would take, 16 weeks to train an employee, they can cut that down. And it's provided for free, and it's also their training. An example of one company that utilized this program in a similar program in a competing state, they thought they were going to spend, it was a European company, they thought they were going to spend 8 weeks in America training and 8 weeks in Europe training. What they found out is the success of the program here in the States, they are eliminating the training that they have to do in Europe. It makes it quicker to market, and it also lowers the cost of development for that company to come to Virginia. This was created in 2019, and we're already ranked second nationally by Area Development Magazine. Now, while rural localities have access to more land, we might not necessarily have the workforce necessary for that company. What Virginia Talent Accelerator program enables us to do is we can retool the existing workforce we have or train up the people that are living in the area. This they also provide assistance in locating and attracting workforce. Now, because this program is new, we're still looking for funding to make this that we can roll it out across the Commonwealth. We've already seen success with the Talent Accelerator in Morgan Olson in Danville, and Blue Star that was recently announced in Danville. One reason why they picked Virginia, they knew with the amount of jobs that they were creating, the thousands of jobs that they were creating for Wytheville, they knew anywhere they went, talent was going to be an issue. So they kind of took that and they said, okay, we know we're going to have a problem getting people no matter where we go. But what will enable us to train the people we can get as quickly as possible? And they said the Talent Accelerator program is one reason why they picked Virginia. Now, the Virginia Jobs Investment Program is a lower level entry into incentives that the Commonwealth offers. It is frequently used, and it helps offset the recruitment and training costs. It's up to $1,000 per job. But the big thing is it provides consulting services to the company, including their HR departments, in making sure that they have the job descriptions well worded and targeting the right people, as well as making sure that what they're looking for in an employee is appropriate. Fully funding both the Talent Accelerator program and VGIP will be instrumental in our rural economic development efforts. Some other priorities that are in the public policy, obviously broadband is a huge thing for rural Virginia. Here in Culpeper, we think we have a great application for the VATI grant with all points. Anything we can do to energy in the regulatory process. Obviously, we want to make sure companies are doing the right thing in the right areas, but we don't want to add any additional red tape that we see in regulatory processes. When it comes to incentives, keeping the Commonwealth Opportunity Fund, enterprise zones, the agriculture, forest, industrial development grant, data center and manufacturing incentives, keeping those, and then also extending the major business facilities job tax credit. And then the last two things, the continuation of the current EDA and IDA structure. It's critical that we keep that. That's how we're able to do a lot of business with the EDAs and IDAs as they are. And then finally, maintaining Virginia's right to work status as is. That is critical in what we do for economic development, and companies keep coming back to our right to work status. And finally, I hope to see everyone at the Virginia Legislative Reception on January 18th in Richmond. And then I'm hoping to be and meet with you at the Pocahontas Building on January 19th to discuss these issues. And we can go more in depth on any of these. And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on the contact details here below if you have any questions.
Thank you, Brian. We'll open it up to our representatives to see if anybody has any questions. And I'd like to welcome Brian. He's fairly new to the county. I think he started in September, and I know he's still getting acclimated with all of our wonderful restaurants. My favorite line is he's always looking for lunch. So if anybody would like to take Brian out to lunch, I'm sure his contact details are right there. But we'll open it up to our legislators. Do you have any questions for Brian?
I do.
Go ahead, Dylan.
Question in regards to a couple of things. So you mentioned costs and fully funding the VGA, the Virginia, whatever, the VTAP and the other programs. What is the full cost of that?
I will have to I know VDP submitted that information. I can get that and send you that information.
So Christy sent you that info?
Yes.
Okay. You also mentioned red tape. Exactly what do you mean by like some of the
Well-
energy red tape and things like that?
Well,
that are prohibiting businesses from
I
coming
think
to our rule?
I think I combined those. The regulatory, one issue that we have is we'll have some programs that or some development that will happen. A lot of it will be greenfield development, and we're getting held up, whether that's going through DEQ or through VDOT. So the amount of time that we can slow that down. We've had some issues come up with environmental justice, and some of that's been delayed a little bit. But I know last year there was one issue where they were looking to make projects keep going further and further out in their notification. And that's information that we have a letter that I can provide that came from VDOT on that.
Okay.
Thank you, Delegate Weber. Do any other legislators have any questions for Brian? All right, hearing none. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Delegate Weber, for that wonderful question. We will move along and we will now go to Marty Bywaters Baldwin with Rappahannock Goodwill Industries and Virginia Career Works, presenting on behalf of workforce legislation. Marty, thank you for joining us this morning.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank the Culpeper Chamber for this invitation and to our legislators for being here this morning. I think it's fitting that economic development is followed by workforce development, because we've seen during this critical time how the two are linked, and businesses are telling us that skilled workforce is the main factor in them deciding to come to Virginia or stay in the Commonwealth. So my name is Marty Bywaters Baldwin. I'm the Director of Workforce Services for Rappahannock Goodwill, and I'm based here in Culpeper at the Virginia Career Works Center in Culpeper. So a little bit about our nonprofit, Rappahannock Goodwill, has been around. It's locally owned and operated, been around for over 50 years. Started with parents of children with adult children with disabilities to help those individuals get to work and experience transformation of work. And what we realize is those same processes to empower folks with disabilities work with anybody to connect with jobs and to move towards family sustaining wages. And so our business model is one of social enterprise. So the money that's generated from the donated goods stores, when you donate shirts and household goods, goes to fund our operation like in Culpeper to help people connect with work. We have a triple bottom line of people, profit, and planet. So we help about 1,000 people a month that are looking for jobs in one stage of the job search process or another. Last year, even during the pandemic, I'm proud to say that we were able to help 950 folks find employment locally. 106 individuals earned advanced certifications, and we kept a lot of garbage out of the landfill through the recycling efforts of the donated goods stores. So our goal in workforce development is to help local folks in Culpeper get to a living wage career. We do that through different ways. We offer different services here at the Virginia Career Works Center. We have funding through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act grant through Virginia Career Works to pay for folks to go back to school to get certifications. We can fund internships. We've been able to do that in over 100 local businesses where we can sponsor somebody to work for a couple months and then the business can hire them on. We can only do it through community partnerships, and then we create access to internet, computers, resources to help people navigate their careers. I want to draw your attention to a few numbers here on the screen for what the living wage is for Culpeper County. For a single adult, so this could be a recent high school graduate or middle-aged adult, living wage is about $15 an hour. And it's been great to see businesses really compete and get close to that dollar amount so that single adults can live and pay rent in the county. So this living wage is just the bare minimum for housing, transportation, food, utilities that an individual or family needs to make ends meet. For a family of 4 in Culpeper, so that's 2 adults, both working full time with 2 kids. Both of those adults need to make $21 an hour to pay rent and to meet the bills. And again, there are career opportunities here locally, maybe not entry level, but with career pathways that show how folks can move up in a company. There's companies that are supporting that wage. The tricky one that I want us to focus on, and we'll look at this again at the end of my presentation, is for 1 adult with 1 kid. So a single parent in the county needs to make $31 an hour in order to pay the bills. So I've got 2 young kids and understand the expenses there. But to jump from $15 an hour to $31 an hour to pay the expenses, that's a lot of goldfish and Cheerios that you're having to pay for. So there's got to be something else going on more than just cost of hungry kids. And we're going to look at what that might be and how that's limiting folks for entering the workforce. So Virginia splits up the Commonwealth into local workforce development areas, and Rappahannock Goodwill serves the counties in 2 of those local workforce areas, the Piedmont region and the Bay region, and then we staff or support the staff at the Virginia Career Work Centers that you see listed here on the screen. So I've got some good news on workforce development. Virginia, again, in 2021 is the top state in the nation for business. This is 2nd year in a row that Virginia has won this distinction, and the 5th time that Virginia's been the best state for business since 2007 for this ranking system. That's great news, and really what has propelled Virginia to the top there in those rankings are our strong education system, both K-12 and post-secondary. We ranked 2nd in the country, and our skilled workforce. The workforce got 3rd highest in the nation. And those 2 things combined help push Virginia to the top as the best business-friendly state. The message today for us is it's not time to let up on the gas pedal in supporting workforce development, especially with the changes that are happening in the economy. So I've got 3 priorities for our legislators that we think are important to focus on in this coming year. And they're summed up in this sort of one statement that their goal is to provide Virginia businesses with skilled employees that are ready and able to work. So we'll focus on those 2 things, skilled, ready, and able. So as far as skilled goes, one way that legislators can support that is by fully funding job training programs, and ones that are flexible and customizable and responsive to business needs, and that lead a pathway towards further education and career development. We mentioned some of these today. Brian mentioned the VTAP program, the WIA program that supports our work, the Virginia Career Work Centers, and the G3 program that has opened up a lot of possibilities for individuals to attend community college that might not otherwise have been able to afford those. So fully funding those job training programs is important for us. On the readiness piece, in our conversations with businesses here in Culpeper, we hear this message over and over that technical training, the business say, we can teach you a lot of the technical aspects of operating our machine or using our information system, but we need folks that are ready to work. And so that means being able to handle conflict and communication, to show initiative, to demonstrate leadership, to work with a team. And that's what we do with Goodwill and Virginia Career Works. Job readiness, work readiness is our arena. And so we've got different ways that we do that. A lot of it is one-on-one, working with folks to get their resume ready and to be prepared for interviews, also to develop basic computer skills that are going to be needed, as well as those interpersonal skills to succeed at work. And during the pandemic, actually, we as the Virginia Career Works system and the local workforce development boards operated the federal work readiness program. It's called Wagner-Pizer. It's Title III of the WIA legislation. and the state can determine who runs and operates that. Unfortunately, after the crisis of the pandemic ended, that program for work readiness was handed back to another entity in Virginia. And I think this is a real opportunity for us to both fund our rural and small career work centers through the Widener-Pizer program. Also, the local workforce development boards provide local accountability. So they're made up of a council of elected officials, also business leaders, community partners that manage to see if Marty and his team are doing a good job for the Culpeper community, if businesses are getting the work-ready individuals they need. So I think moving that program and that funding of Widener-Pizer back to the local workforce development boards to operate provides accountability and also access in our rural communities. And then the third thing is that businesses are saying we need skilled workers that are ready to work, but they also need to be able to work. And I think if in Virginia we can find a way to engage the workers that have been kept on the sidelines by childcare cost. So I mentioned that drastic jump in the living wage required by just having one child. And we know that there's a lot of folks in the community that haven't jumped back into work because of the cost of childcare and the complications of that. A few stats for you. The cost of childcare in Virginia is the 10th highest in the nation. The cost of providing childcare for one infant is $14,000 a year. Add a second child that's 4 years old and it's $24,000 a year. So that's a lot of money that businesses aren't able to bear the full weight of that expense, and workers aren't as well. So I think any kind of solution that we can find to help limit some of the expenses of childcare costs frees up a lot of parents to then jump back into the workforce and fill some of the job openings that we are seeing. I want to share with you kind of to put a personal touch on those 950 folks that we were able to assist in getting jobs locally last year. Anthony is an individual that came into our Career Work Center in Culpeper in the midst of the pandemic. And I'm going to let him share his story in his own words. And Jeff, maybe you can give me a thumbs up if we can hear this audio or not. I can reshare it if we can. Just a second here. I'll hit play.
Hi, I'm Anthony from Culpeper. Before COVID-19, I worked for a number of years in the food and hospitality industry. The pandemic caused the downtown restaurant where I worked to close permanently, and I lost my job. I decided right then that I would change my career and make myself an essential employee. Through Goodwill, I took advantage of a workforce grant that paid for me to attend commercial driver's training. I am now the proud owner of my CDL A license and excited about my next job opportunity.
So I like a lot about Anthony's story. Unfortunately, he worked at one of the best restaurants we had on Davis Street that closed during the pandemic. But his phrase really strikes with me. He said, I decided to make myself essential. And he knew that the path to doing that was through education and certifications. So he came into the Virginia Career Work Center here in Culpeper. We were able to connect him with the WIA grant that could pay for him to go to Germanna and get his CDL license through the CDS driving school. And then he, after he got that certification, our team worked with him to apply for jobs locally. And he got a job with ME Concrete driving trucks. The great thing is he went from making $2.13 an hour plus tips, restaurant industry, to making a guaranteed $20.75 an hour. So right there, that living wage and then some. And it was a 6-week course and a few month process, but Anthony is able to make that jump to a living wage. I put here as well some of the logos. Workforce development doesn't work without partnerships, and wanted to acknowledge some of those partners that make stories like Anthony's possible. We mentioned, the community college, also K-12 education and CTE are essential in our community for getting folks on a career pathway to success. And there's a lot of support organizations that make this kind of thing happen.
Hi, I'm Anthony from Culpeper. Sorry,
Sorry, we heard Anthony once. I wanted to just end again with a celebration of workforce development with the CTEC school opening this year. This picture is from a job fair that we held the first week that CTEC was open, with 17 businesses and 100 job seekers. And the opportunities for collaboration between business, education, and the community are just really strong, and it's exciting time for workforce development in the area. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Marty. We'll open it up to our legislators. Does anybody have any questions for Marty?
Yeah, I have a question real quick. This is Nick Freitas.
Hi, Nick.
Hey, Marty. Yeah, again, thank you for the presentation. A couple things that would be really helpful, I know for myself, and I think for others as well, is whenever we look at the job training programs, obviously there's a number of different job training programs out there. Some work better than others. The biggest statistic that I'm always looking for when anybody is asking me to take my constituents' money and put it towards something is what sort of job placement is taking place after the training. Because I've seen some programs where they talk a lot about the number of people that go through the training, but they don't talk about the job placement. And so the story that you just provided, that's an excellent one. And the more we can get information on that, the better it helps us kind of evaluate these programs in order to make sure that we're being efficient keepers of the people's tax dollars. The other thing I would say that we're coming into whenever we talk about wages. The problem is we're not the #1 state to do business. CNBC drastically altered their criteria last year on how they judge this, and they added criteria above things like business-friendly environment, education, infrastructure, in order to include things like whether or not your state had mail-in voting laws. And they actually elevated that over other important criteria. If they had actually kept the criteria the same way they had before, we would have dropped 4 places, and then we've also come out 49th in the country in order to start a new business. And I think that directly affects, everyone that you're trying to help, because one of the things that we look at whenever we look at wages, we see that in dollar amount that goes to the employee. And a lot of times what's not being tabulated into this is all of the additional costs that go to the employer for hiring someone. And over the last couple of years, we've drastically increased that cost. And when you do that, you make it more difficult to hire people. So I think one of the big jobs, I know that Mike has worked on this, and we're going to continue to work on it. But, and this was brought up before, we're going to try to remove some of that red tape so that we have employers have more money available to be able to invest, to be able to hire people, and to be able to be more competitive on the wage front without having to worry about how much additional dollars they have to set aside because of government mandates. But again, to your point, it would really be helpful if you have those stats on when someone goes through this job training, where do they get placed? Are they able to find a job based off of the skills that they're learning? That would be really helpful. And thank you very much for your presentation.
Yeah, no, great feedback. I really appreciate that, and good analysis of the situation. The main program that funds what we do is through the Federal Department of Labor, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and it is managed, and we're held accountable at the local level through the workforce development boards. And there are common performance measures. So job placement's one, earnings is a second one, graduation rate's a third. And then the added piece that we're required to report on and to meet every year in order to keep our contract is also retention of jobs after 12 months of getting that job. So that's great. I'm happy to send those numbers.
Awesome. Thank you, Delegate Freitas, for that feedback. Do any other legislators have a question for Marty? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on. Thank you, Marty. Wonderful presentation. Always a pleasure to see you. I'd like now to welcome Jim Lagraff from Rappahannock Rapidan Community Services, who will be discussing community health. Jim, thank you for joining us today. Jim, I think you're muted. If you could unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Thank you for inviting me, Jeff, and thank you, representatives, for being here today. I do want to say I'm not a physical health person. I'm here to talk about healthcare, so I'll just very quickly touch upon COVID with some stuff from the health department. I think people know my background is much more in the behavioral health field. Just a little bit of background. Let me get my thing to work here for us. There we go. About Rappahannock Rapid and Community Services. We serve as the Community Service Board, and there are 40 community service boards in Virginia, and also the Area Agency on Aging, which there's 26 in Virginia, for Planning District number 9, which includes Culpeper County. We are the only combined community service board and area agency on aging in Virginia. So we're the only organization that combines those two functions. We support a regional population of 180,000 community members and almost 2,000 square miles. This year, as an organization, our operating budget's approximately $32 million, which is about a 15% increase from last year. We employ about 400 people, about 415 employees. And our mission is to improve the quality of life in Culpeper, Fauquier, Madison, Orange, and Rappahannock counties by providing comprehensive behavioral health, developmental disability, substance use disorder, and aging services. And I do like to include that because I'm quite frequently approached and people are just not overly familiar with the breadth of us as an organization and exactly what we do. Like I said, I'm not a physical health person, so I asked the health department and they sent along a couple slides for me this morning. Just a quick update on COVID. Delta continues to be the dominant strain in our area. Omicron is here, but it's really at this point too soon to tell what the transmittability or severity of those things will be. As always, our health department prescribes vaccines are safe and effective and do save lives. And again, getting vaccinated helps prevent severe illnesses. If you haven't recently seen the trends in COVID cases in Culpeper County, I think we are still at a little bit of an elevated perspective, but we have seen some progress as of late, and the vaccination status in our community. And I apologize, it might be a little small to read as far as the age demographics, but we are doing pretty well as a community as far as our vaccination rates. But for me, really what I'm most interested to talk about this morning is really some of the behavioral health updates and bringing attention to our representatives on some immediate concerns and some long-range concerns that I think we all need to address. I think first of critical importance is the pandemic has increased mental health symptoms and substance use. Recently, we received a report that in Culpeper County in the first 6 months of this year, we had 15 overdose deaths. That is equal to all of the overdose deaths of last year. So we are on a very bad trend in our county this year for that. Additionally, the current state hospital bed crisis has created a significant burden on law enforcement and created some risk for our community members. At this point in time, we're about 250 reduced adult beds, and we are running at 75% capacity for children's state hospital beds. At this time, there were only 18 beds, state hospital beds for Virginia for all the children who might need them. So those are some of the immediate concerns. Longer range, I think we have to acknowledge we live in an area with a critical shortage of healthcare providers. And in Virginia, our behavioral health spending formularies are really upside down. As a Commonwealth, we are spending 75% of our state behavioral health dollars on the state hospital system and only spending 25% on community-based services. That is an exact opposite of what most states spend. Most states will spend 75% of their dollars on community-based level care. The problem that this creates in Virginia is that with all of our spending going into the state hospital system, we create a negative loop cycle where, because there is such a lack of community-based care, people then default have to go into the state hospital system. And I threw this in, this just actually came out yesterday, but I thought it was really interesting. The Surgeon General released yesterday a report or an advisory. And what really shocked me is the second bullet point. In early 2021, emergency department visits in the United States for suspected suicide attempts were 51% higher for adolescent girls and 4% higher for adolescent boys as compared to the same period in early 2019. And I thought that was kind of a shocking statistic, and it really does speak to the effects of the pandemic. And I think the pandemic measures that were put in place, reduction in in-person interactions among children and friends and social supports, we are really seeing the negative consequences of that on our teens. So, what can we do? We really need to support and invest in prevention and reasonable harm reduction programs. We need to expand the use of telehealth options. We need to expand and support our healthcare workforce, expand and strengthen our mental health crisis services. We need to address the upside down ratio in funds for hospitals versus community-based care. And really, I think most critical in all of this is we really need to improve coordination across all levels of government to address our behavioral health needs in our area. So when we're talking prevention and harm reduction, we are talking about things about understanding ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and the training that goes with that, but also an awareness that the best prevention is to prevent trauma and adverse childhood experiences in our children. And again, some other options here, drug drop boxes are very effective. Encouraging people to take mental health first aid trainings like we would physical health first aid trainings, providing access to fentanyl test strips. We can't help people with a substance use problem if they are dying of overdose. And fentanyl test strips are cheap and very effective in helping people safely use, which we don't like, but keeping them alive so that we can get people into appropriate programs and services. And really encouraging anti-stigma activities. I have this little slide here. 40% of people who suffer from anxiety or depression do not seek help because of the stigma of mental health. And we really have to get over this idea that mental health is a character flaw. Excuse me. Additionally, we need to expand the use of telehealth. We talked a little bit about broadband this morning, but we really need to increase access, especially in the rural parts of our community. From a legislative or regulatory perspective, continue to support progress of regulatory changes to allow providers to be reimbursed for telehealth visits. Telehealth visits are the clinical equivalent of face-to-face visits, and we need to appreciate that and allow that to continue. Again, additionally, the use of telehealth can assist with the significant provider shortage concerns that we are experiencing. From our organization, our experience during the pandemic was community members in need were able to continue to be supported just because of telehealth. Our appointment no-show rates went way down, but where we had technology challenges, either from a staff or a client perspective, these were really magnified at this point in time. We also need to expand and support our healthcare workforce. Virginia currently ranks 40th nationally in access to trained mental health workforce. And the chronic workforce shortages really existed in the healthcare sector prior to the pandemic, and they have just been compounded by it. But for example, just in July alone, Virginia's healthcare and social assistance sector lost over 2,000 jobs. And we are seeing vacancy rates in critical community programs to keep people safe running as high as 35%, especially in areas like emergency services and developmental disability direct support professional positions. And so we need to provide incentives to attract individuals to work in this area and work in healthcare. Just a couple quick examples about how we are disproportionately spending on state versus community care. State hospitals currently are providing between $12,000 and $20,000 in recruitment and retention bonuses at state hospitals at this point in time. And our Department of Behavioral Health is slated to receive ongoing general funds to raise state employee salary structures equivalently. And the inequity that is being created here is going to have significant negative impact on community service boards' ability to hire and retain local staff. And I think we do have to remember, community service boards are our community safety net. And my recommendation is that for every dollar the governor and the General Assembly decide to invest in state psychiatric facilities and training centers, equal money must be invested into our community care. And again, this just gives you a quick snapshot with recent ARPA funding. You will see that the Department of Behavioral Health was granted $174 million, which really all went to state facilities, community service boards to increase the community level of care, which is the system that keeps people out of all those state hospitals, received by comparison $48 million. So we're looking at about $26 million difference in those state fund spending. So what else can be done? As we talked about, correct the upside down ratio in funds for hospitals versus community-based care, and just refer to the previous slide. Additionally, we really need to look at improving our coordination across all levels of government. I think most people are aware of the Marcus Peter Act. We are an organization that was an early implementer of the goals of Marcus Peters. And while the intent of the act, I think, is very noble, and we have 10 law enforcement jurisdictions that we work with as an organization. All of those law enforcement jurisdictions signed on as partners because I believe they understood the importance and how much the ideals of having behavioral health co-respond and work closely with law enforcement to have a seamless level of care to people in our community in crisis. I think because of the way the act on the back end was laid out, we still cannot get a single one of our 10 law enforcement jurisdictions to sign on board with the way the law was actually finally implemented. And again, support and advocate for the CSB system. The CSB system as a model is very unique, but what is unique about it and what I think makes it an excellent system is that we are locally accountable. If there is a concern or question on any type of behavioral health services in our community, we are here, we are accountable to our local government, and as opposed to moving systems much more to the state level of care. So again, I thank you for my time, and there is my contact information.
Thank you, Jim. I will open it up to legislators if they have any questions for Jim. I'm hearing.
This is Nick. I just want to thank Jim. I know this has been a really difficult time with respect to everything going on over the last 2 years. They've been really overworked, and then they have just been burning the midnight oil in order to help people in our community. And with the increase in mental health associated issues that we've seen. So again, thank you very much, and certainly want to find ways to be able to help you out with the resources that you need.
And thanks, Nick. I appreciate that. And I will say this again, I can't reiterate it enough, that a strong community-based system will save state resources. It will get people the appropriate care at the appropriate level. The worst thing that we can do is sending our community members outside of our district, away from their natural supports, away from local services that know people. Our system is backwards in Virginia.
Jim?
Yes.
This is Michael Weber. So in regards to those services, are we talking therapy or are we talking actual psychologists to get these things done? Because getting a child tested for some behavioral issues, A, is expensive, and B, there's wait lists for months in order to get a child assessed. And how do we even begin to make sure that child is getting the necessary care when they can't even get an appropriate assessment for months at a time?
So I guess your answer is yes to all of that, Mike. I agree. We have, I think, as I said, we are 40th nationally in access to and availability of mental health professionals. We are in a terrible spot. And I would say, additionally, where Culpeper sits, we tend to be pulled to the south, to Charlottesville, to the, providers get pulled to the north where they make a lot more money. So being able to keep people in our region and district is critically important. We have some incentives for people who are looking to work in this field, but we have to figure out ways to incentivize the number of people entering school who are looking to be social workers and therapists and psychologists is nowhere near meeting the need.
So question in regards to those types of incentives, what kind of incentives are usually used, and how can we, I guess, improve upon those?
Well, I think right now there are some tuition deferral programs. I think, loan forgiveness programs. We actually, as an organization, are starting our own scholarship program. We have found we can't hire them, so we need to grow our own clinicians, where we are self-funding some scholarships with, hopefully then licensure, where an agreement for licensure, they will agree to work for us. So I think we have to be creative in looking at some of those things and further supporting access to those programs and knowledge of those programs. I think it's a very long-term look. I also think, as I said earlier too, better embracing of telehealth. It doesn't matter if the psychologist is in the room or across the country. As if in our assessments, we've learned, and as an industry, to be able to make telehealth a very effective modality of support and services. So making sure that temporary regulatory reliefs that have been put in place during the pandemic to allow those things continue permanently. So we might not have a clinician locally, but if I have one in Chicago who is willing to talk, and frankly, sometimes, especially when you're talking kids who can have very specific needs, finding that expert can be critical, and telehealth can really help in some of those regards as well. I also think looking at, I would say it's like many other businesses and industries, making sure we are not regulating ourselves out of a job. For example, we were touching base, opened a recovery center in Culpeper, which is predominantly staffed by peers, people who have lived experience and gone through a certification and training, whether it's mental health or substance abuse. They are backed up by clinically licensed professionals, but by being able to use peers, we are able to open this center eventually to be 24/7 to community members. And last month, we've been open 3 months. Last month, we had 1,000 visitors who attended that, either to talk to a peer, to join a therapy group, we have education trainings, we have a whole slew of support services in that model. But it's a very different model. It's using staff who might not have the clinical training that other licensed programs that are very expensive would need, but it is allowing people to get services. It's also allowing us to see people we might not necessarily see because of wait lists and all those other types of things, and triage people who are most critical need to make sure they get in services quicker.
Okay. The one last question: what is the biggest pushback when it comes to funding? Why? I mean, obviously, CSBs and various legislators have already pushed or are pushing to reverse the funding, the funding mechanisms that you were talking about. What has been the biggest pushback, and why do we keep funding hospitals as opposed to our local communities?
The why question I can't answer. I would say the biggest pushback is the state-sponsored system is a runaway train. And when you create a system, it needs to be fed. And so I think what state hospitals are big economic engines for those areas. They employ a lot of people. And so when you have those mechanisms in place, it is awful hard to break that cycle. I will be honest, I was personally very disappointed. We had ARPA funds last year, 220 million or something, whatever that came into the state system. I thought that was a phenomenal opportunity we had in Virginia to reverse that cycle. And I think understanding the priorities when we have people in our community who are in crisis, when we have a state hospital system that we know is already upside down funded, and we allocate $50 million to HVAC and repair of some old hospital structures, and spend $3 million statewide to enhance mobile crisis programs, we have a problem. And, I think there is, I touched upon it a little bit, but I believe, and I'm very hopeful with our next administration, that there is a collaborative approach. This, as I said this before, I've worked out, multiple states. I've worked in the private sector. The CSB as a business model for getting people help at a local level is a really good model. And I think having leadership at the Department of Behavioral Health who understands that and is willing to partner and work collaboratively in the future, I think would be critical if we're going to make changes that we need. Our outcomes of behavioral health in Virginia are not acceptable for what this state has to offer its citizens.
Hey, Jim, one other point too, because I couldn't agree more with you on the telemedicine component and kind of the overregulation side and how that actually prevents people. I mean, one of the things that we run into, we had some good success, I think it was last year or the year before, with respect to expanding scope of practice for things like nurse practitioners. And a lot of that is built under the understanding that we're not suggesting that the additional education and training that it goes into some of these more specific skill sets is not necessary. But what we are saying is that with technology enhanced healthcare and things like that, this is not 40 years ago or even 30 years ago where if that knowledge didn't reside in the person's head, they didn't have a quick and effective way to get it. Now we do have those things. We do have mechanisms for doing testing and analysis that don't require the person actually delivering the test to, have 12 years of 12 years of advanced education. So one of the things that as we try to work on either expanding scope of practice or creating more avenues for telehealth, that's one thing that we can really use your help on when we go down there for committees and whatnot, because again, there's this concern that we're trying to create, the Wild West where, there's snake oil salesmen going around with their carts, and that's not the case. Sometimes we need to explain to our colleagues though, that in some of these rural areas, we're talking about a zero-sum game. If they can't get telehealth, or if we can't expand scope of practice in an appropriate, responsible manner, it's not that, they'll just have to go to a slightly more expensive. No, they won't get anything.
Right.
And we need to be able to make that argument. So we'll definitely be reaching out to see how we do that. But again, thanks again for your presentation, Jim.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Freitas. Thank you, Jim. We will share out his presentation. We'll share everything out. So if anybody has any further questions, Jim's contact information will be in there. We are going to move along to Brent Hunsicker from Friends of the Rappahannock. They are our Culpeper Chamber of Commerce Nonprofit of the Year, and they will be discussing environmental legislation. Brent, thank you for joining us today.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much. As you said, my name is Brent Hunsicker. I'm with Friends of the Rappahannock. We're very glad to be here today to present on some of our priorities for the 2022 legislative session. First of all, he is correct. We are very glad to have won the Chamber's Nonprofit of the Year for the Culpeper region, something we have been trying to expand our reach into the Headwaters region, and we recently opened last year an office in Culpeper with now, I believe, up to 3 full-time employees. So we're very proud of that. As well as we have signed a contract with Culpeper County, working with the Cooperative Extension and Department of Forestry to start what we are calling the Rappahannock Conservation Nursery, where we will be able to grow out different sizes of trees, sell them at cost, or donate them, or sell them at wholesale to hopefully expand our tree planting efforts in the upper part of the watershed, and that will also trickle downriver as well, all the way to the mouth with the Chesapeake Bay. And then another good development, of which I'm not sure if people know, we recently received a NOAA MIWI grant, which is every student in 4th, 6th, and 9th grade in Virginia. It's an unfunded mandate that they are supposed to receive a meaningful watershed educational experience. We recently received funding to operate in Culpeper and Fauquier counties. So we're hoping that as schools open and things can hopefully open a little bit more as we go, we will be able to get into the schools and undertake those educational experiences for environmental literacy in the next couple of years. So that's a couple what I would view as very positive developments in the Culpeper region. So thanks again for being here. So I will quickly go through some of our legislative priorities coming up in the 2022 session. Get my screen to move. There we go. So just so you know, Friends of the Rappahannock was founded in 1985 as a nonprofit grassroots conservation organization. Our mission is to be the voice and active force for a healthy and scenic Rappahannock River. And that is from the headwaters all the way down at Chester Gap, all the way down to the Chesapeake Bay. Currently, the Rappahannock River is now the longest designated scenic river in Virginia. So we are very proud of that fact from last year. There are 3 pillars that we work on: advocacy, education, and restoration. We operate in our localities at the state level and then on the federal level for advocacy as needed. Education, we have an educational presence all the way from Rappahannock County all the way down to Lancaster and Middlesex counties now in every county and designated cities in Fredericksburg as well. And we also now have offices in Culpeper, Fredericksburg, and Rappahannock. So we are truly watershed wide. So on to some of the 2022 legislative priorities that we have. We've broken them down into kind of 2 main buckets, I'll call them: funding needs, which are water quality programs, and then environmental literacy, and then policy goals, which is much more would be legislation and regulatory based. So water quality programs, the first one is the Virginia Agricultural Cost Share Program. This is the cost share funding program for our farmers and other agricultural folks in that sector. We are asking for full funding of that. The number about how you tabulate that is somewhat squishy. So we are recommending full funding from what the agricultural assessment needs assessment is. And so the number 100 million has been bandied about, but from what I understand, talking with my colleagues, the number varies a little bit from that number. So we will let time take its course and to figure out exactly what that number is, working with the appropriations committees as well. The second program for water quality is something called the Virginia Conservation Assistance Program. This is a cost share program that is administered by the soil and water conservation districts that seeks to deal with erosion and stormwater issues with not new development, but older development and properties. So there you can have many homeowners, whether commercial or private, who have issues with stormwater or erosion, and they have had real issues with having the technical expertise and then some cost share money to help install projects to deal with these best management practices. It could be bioretention, tree planting, living shorelines. There's a whole host of best management practices. Currently, that's funded at $1 million a year. We are working with our colleagues to seek $2 million a year in the next budget. There is a backlog of projects that could be funded, as well as there are issues with how the technical assistance funding is given out to the stormwater conservation districts. I don't want to go too far into it, but the fact of the matter is they only receive technical assistance money if a project is approved at the state level. So time spent doing site visits and helping homeowners create applications to be turned in. If they are not successfully approved at the state level, they do not receive the $500 technical assistance money for that. As well, moving on, Stormwater Local Assistance Fund. As we know, as we approach 2025, helping our localities deal with our stormwater issues remains a large issue, and we seek to fund that at $80 million a year for a total of 160 in the biennium. Wastewater treatment plants. We have made lots of progress through our wastewater treatment plants throughout the Commonwealth, and to continue that progress, The needs assessment at this time, from what our understanding is $50 million a year, $100 million for the biennium in the next 2 years. And then finally, dealing with urban and community tree canopy programs. We are supporting a Virginia Department of Forestry budget request that has been put in at $3 million a year for a total of $6 million to continue to expand and support urban and community tree canopy programs. There's a few pieces to this, one of which is mapping out heat island sectors where to help delineate where trees are needed most and to help our localities set up maintenance and tree planting programs that so we have dedicated and trained skilled workforce on the ground to carry out these programs going forward to help us meet our 2025 WIP goals. Moving on, environmental education, environmental literacy. This is a major, for Friends of the Rappahannock, one of our, perhaps our major goal is two things. One is a full-time equivalent position for the coordination of all environmental literacy programs in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We are not sure yet if this position will be included in the current administration's budget when it is announced next week. We are hoping it will be so, and if not, we will be working with legislators to try and create a budget amendment to get this in. Currently, the Office of Environmental Education at DCR was eliminated a few years ago. We have had the retirement or unfortunately passing on of at least 3 government employees within the Commonwealth who provided very stable leadership on environmental literacy. And so there is what I would call a large void of leadership at the top. And so we are hoping to have a position created, whether it's staffed at DCR, the Department of Education, or the Science Museum.
Hey, Brent.
Yes.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Can you define environmental literacy?
Yes, sir. So environmental literacy, they use the terms environmental education or environmental literacy interchangeably. So what we are trying to get away from is the term only meaningful watershed educational experience, because there are many types of environmental literacy. So this could be learning about the ecological systems, or I prefer to even throw in agriculture or forestry of many different types, to be educating our kids about environmental literacy in general, the natural systems that support whether it's agriculture or watersheds in general, if that makes sense to you. Environmental literacy is a term that was used in budget amendments in the past and is used in many pieces of code, and so we continue to use that term going forward. As well as,
I'm sorry, Brent, just real quick on that point. So I know that Friends of the Rappahannock, you guys got a lot of, you got video courses, you've got summer camps, you got learning labs, you got all those things. So when we're talking about environmental literacy, are we talking about funding that would go to expand those programs, or are we talking about curriculums that would be integrated into the public school system? And if we're talking about the latter, is there like a copy of that curriculum that we can see? Because I haven't been able to find anything.
Right. So, and thank you for your question. So this funding would go towards so two pieces. The FTE position would go towards managing that curriculum and kind of managing overall environmental literacy program in the schools in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Currently, one piece that I haven't gotten to yet, I should mention that now, is maintaining DCR grant funds. There's a grant fund process that currently provides $250,000 a year for any organization that would like to apply from the Commonwealth for environmental literacy programming. And that's a very broad definition of what that is. Currently, that money can only be applied for if you're in the Chesapeake Bay region. We would like to make that money available statewide, and that is another goal where we are going to try and have that language changed to statewide, not just the Chesapeake Bay region. This coordinator position would oversee trying to create and install curriculum in the classrooms in the entire Commonwealth of Virginia. Currently, as I mentioned, MWE's Meaningful Watershed Educational Experiences are a small piece of what we would like to be teaching in the classrooms. It is an unfunded mandate, and so even to have someone from up top able to kind of what I will call herd the cats of environmental literacy would be very helpful going forward.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, so the effort at this point is to fund the full-time position at the state level, and then they would be responsible for essentially, like you said, kind of getting all the different organizations together and then developing what the literacy curriculum would look like, and then that would be implemented. So what the ask is that we fund the position, but we're not going to know what the curriculum is just yet.
That is correct. There is already curriculum that exists. However, I can back up and say 2 years ago, in the ninth grades in Virginia, many school systems went from teaching physical science in the ninth grade to environmental science in the ninth grade. And there was very little support from the state level to designate for example, what textbooks could be used, or to help create curriculum to give to our teachers at the county level. So the teachers were kind of left out in kind of high and dry to have to create their own environmental science curriculum without any guidance or help from the state level, of which many watershed organizations stepped forward. Nonprofits were forced to step forward and hold a lot of planet professional developments to help guide these teachers through that curriculum process. So that's just one small example of where this FTE could come in handy. And so what these DCR grant funds, we would seek to just maintain that $250,000 a year level. 2 years ago or last year was at $80,000. We are very thankful to our legislators who put in budget amendments to bump that up to $250,000. And we are hoping to see, obviously, applications put in for that, to have that allocated. That process begins in July of next year as well. Some policy goals, moving over from the budgetary funding. I know everyone always loves to talk money, so let's talk policy very quickly. Making progress. A couple of things that that Friends of the Rappahannock is working with our partners on, you will hear a lot about, is something called codification of what right now is the Coastal Resilience Master Plan. I'm sure some of you might have seen that was released yesterday by the Northam administration. We would like to see that codified and a statewide resilience master plan created, because we are seeing flooding and resilience issues statewide, not just on the coast, as well as the technical advisory committee that helps create that resilience master plan. There will be legislation coming forward that would codify this. Obviously, right now it's too early to know bill numbers, but you can count on this type of legislation coming forward. The other piece is tree canopy conservation legislation. Last year, there was a tree canopy conservation legislation that was passed, but it mandated a technical advisory committee to be convened with affected stakeholders, home builders, commercial real estate, conservation groups, a wide variety of stakeholders. That group has since met, and the report came out on November 1st. There were some areas of consensus on that. However, that this issue is still very much in negotiations between different policy and stakeholders as to what this bill might look like going forward. Very much so, I can guarantee you, if anything comes of this, it will be a compromise bill that everyone will be in support of from those sectors. Preserving progress, things that have passed in the past, that Friends of the Rappahannock views as being critical going forward, especially with climate and resilience, is the living shoreline is the preferred alternative. This is a bill that says living shorelines are the preferred shoreline alternative unless the science dictates that that is not the case, then other types of shoreline approaches can be used. Emphasis on something called the nature-based solutions from the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. If you are not familiar with the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, it was created from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative when it was passed. This is a fund that funds projects for flood resilience, community-based flood resilience projects statewide. That's why right now the Coastal Resilience Master Plan is only on the coast, but this fund funds projects and already funded projects that throughout the state. And so we obviously would like to have our master plan and this Community Flood Preparedness Fund mirror the intent and the scope of what they are addressing over time. As well as other issues, VMRC tidal wetlands guidance. These are things that are not legislative currently. They have already been done in regulatory. We are just asking for preserving this to defend these changes. Climate and mature tree amendments to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act. These amendments were finalized in July 1 by the State Water Control Board, and they are in effect now. And the last piece of this will address the polystyrene foam ban. Eventually, phase outs will have to happen for takeout containers and plastic bag fee legislation. We've had 5 localities that have now adopted these plastic bag fee ordinances. And the reason we support these is because anyone who has ever continues to do litter cleanups on the sides of the roads in our waterways will know or should know that small plastics and polystyrene are the #1 thing that we are finding in our waterways, and those numbers continue to increase over time. That said, we understand that we cannot ban our way out of these situations. Becoming more efficient with our recycling and changing up those processes are certainly part of what we will need to do as well. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity to present with you all today. If you all have any questions, I'm glad to answer them. I will say that I work with Brian Hoffman, who some of you might also know, to carry out our state policy work, and I hope to see some of you all perhaps later this afternoon at the Rappahannock River Basin Commission as well. So thank you very much for your time.
And thank you. Thank the legislators for their questions during the presentation. If you we have Brent's contact information there. We will also share that out. We will, if you have any questions for Brent, we'll ask that you reach out to him. We are going to move along to and end with our signature sponsor, Germanna Community College, and their representative today, Dr. Patty Lisk, the Dean of Health Technologies and Nursing, to speak about education. Dr. Lisk, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Little technical issue here, sorry. I apologize profusely.
We can see your screen.
Can you see my educational issues?
Yes, we do.
But you see everything over here on the side too, don't you? Well, we won't, we'll see. How about that? Hooray. Okay, so it's my delight and pleasure to be here to talk to you about some of the educational issues in the state of Virginia. Dr. Gullickson sends her apologies that she was unable to be with you at this time, given another commitment. First of all, I want to take some time to thank you for what you've done for education in the past, and especially for Germanna. I want to thank you for our new building that will be coming soon on our Locust Grove campus. It's a Frank and Nancy Turnage building. It's a new health professions building that will replace our 50-year-old facility that we currently use at Germanna. Now, I haven't been at Germanna for 50 years, but I've been there for numerous years. And when the nursing program first started at Germanna, and I started to work there, we admitted 20 students a year. I'm here to tell you that we have 400 students in our nursing program at this time. So while this building is wonderful and terrific and state-of-the-art, it is a replacement building and it does not begin to house the number of students that we are attempting to produce to meet our community needs. The other thing I really want to spend some time thanking you for is the G3 initiative. Many students, I can tell you from seeing them personally, this has had a tremendous impact on their lives and the lives of their family as they have been able to create complete degrees they never dreamed they would in the past. And they've also created a culture of education in their families, which I think is so, so very important. So why Germanna has such a great appeal? It's because of our ladder curriculum, a very strong ladder curriculum where individuals seeking health careers, especially nursing, can enter the profession and exit at different times in the profession as they move up to their desired level within the profession. For example, they start as CNAs. Many of our area healthcare area high schools have a CNA program now that is dual enrolled with Germanna, CTEC, which we mentioned earlier, being one of them, one at James Monroe, and then one to come in Spotsylvania Career Technical Education Center in the fall. So those students who get that certification as a CNA are able to get a living wage and work right out of high school in our healthcare arenas. Very much needed. These folks are very, very needed. And then they can enter in the fall right back into one of our nursing programs. So this is a great opportunity for them. And we thank you for facilitating that for our students. So let's talk about a little bit about our current situation. So we right now have a severe nursing shortage. Some people would say that nursing is in crisis. But I'll tell you, we'll start with a severe nursing shortage. The shortage came, believe it or not, prior to the pandemic. And it was related to, in some ways, it was related to the choices that females have in choosing an occupation, but it also has a lot to do with the age of our population. As you're aware, our baby boomers are growing and becoming older. Many of them have reached the age of 65. So in 2011, there were 41 million individuals who were 65 or older. And now in 2019, the latest I could find, there are 71 million individuals that are 65 or older. This is like a 73% increase in age. So why is age such a big deal? Well, people who are older require more of our healthcare resources, including more resources from nursing. Then on top of that, enter the pandemic. So with the pandemic, I know you know that nurses were frontline workers in the pandemic and went through much stress and really assisted our country and continue to assist our country as we move through the pandemic. Unfortunately, the stress of the pandemic caused nurses who were near the age of retirement to retire. Other nurses had to quit their jobs and go home and care for their family members who were also sick, or to provide childcare as the children were out of school. Many of those nurses have not returned to the healthcare setting. They have not returned to nursing. So therefore, we are experiencing this severe shortage. Now let's compound that a little further. We're going to have an increasing need in our area. So picture there is our new VA facility that will open in 2024. While this is great news for our citizens, this is of concern to those of us who work in healthcare and are on the front line of producing new healthcare professionals for our community. There's estimated there'll be 750 staff members that work there. Many of those will be healthcare providers and many, many of them will be nurses. So we have that increasing need looming before us as well. So you may hear that our four-year colleagues say, well, let's wait and study the problem and see how bad the shortage is. I'm here to tell you that I think the shortage is real and the need is dire and urgent from our perspective. So what are we doing about it? Well, locally right here at Germanna, we plan to double our program output. We will do that doubling with some of the money I'm going to talk about shortly. But before that, before the money even gets there, we are starting a weekend evening program this summer where we will admit students who I want to say they're non-traditional, but all of our students are non-traditional in the community college. But these are folks that work during the day, and then they want to pursue nursing in the evening and on the weekends. This is a great opportunity for us as a college and for students, because clinical settings and building space, as I've already mentioned, are at premium during the daytime. So this program will use clinical space and building space in the evening and on weekends when our facilities are not as used. So that's a great opportunity. How else is Germanna planning to address the nursing shortage? And I'll talk about the ask in just one second, but we intend to increase our cohorts. That means first semester, second semester, third semester, fourth semester. Takes 4 semesters at Germanna to be a registered nurse, by 60 students a semester until we have 240 more students, and that'll bring us up to 660 enrolled in our program. To do that, we'll probably have to rent a facility to house the program. Four-year programs often question the availability of clinical space. So in nursing education, all students who want to become an RN need to have 500 clinical hours. So their question, in fact, is reasonable. Their question is reasonable, in fact. But to that end, Germanna has already started to develop some solutions by working with our clinical partners. We have developed an innovative model with Mary Washington Healthcare. It's called the Earn While You Learn model. This model allows students to be immersed in the clinical environment with a mentor, and they actually get paid for their experiences in clinical. A great thing for community college students who have financial problems many of the times. The students in the Earn While You Learn model were in the 3rd semester of their program. Their comments were, "I feel like a nurse. I learned more today than I ever learned in my other 3 semesters of nursing." I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing wrong? But we won't go there. Anyhow, that's another day, another story. But then the question was, what do we do with the students in their 4th semester? They've had this fabulous learning experience. They feel like they're ready to roll. What am I going to do that will top that? So in the 4th semester of the program, in conjunction with Mary Washington Hospital, we plan to rotate these students down to the night shift. Now that's practically unheard of in education, that we would put students in the night shift, but think about it, it makes sense. Students who are hired as registered nurses often start on the night shift. Why would their first experience on night shift be as a practicing professional? Why would it not be as a nurse, where they could learn and explore the environment when they had guidance that they need? So 4th semester, these students are going to the night shift. I'll let you know how that goes. Like I said, this is a model that we're rolling out. We're very excited about. We have even written a $1.5 million grant to expand the model across the state of Virginia that we don't know the answer to yet. So these unique approaches increase our clinical capacity. They facilitate entry into practice. So the hope is that the students who've been enmeshed in this clinical environment will be more ready for clinical practice and not have to have such a long orientation, and that the facilities that participate will get a return on investment because the students will stay there and work there. Now, the statewide solution, because the problem is not only local, the problem is statewide. Actually, the problem is national. But the statewide solution is that the Virginia Community College system would ask for $26.6 million to expand nursing across the state of Virginia. So there are 23 community colleges in the state of Virginia. There's one in driving distance of every citizen. 22 of those have nursing programs. So the $26.6 million ask is a collaborative ask across all of our programs to expand for additional faculty, equipment, and also for non-capital renovations. What does this get you? I mean, if I'm going to give you $26.6 million, what are you going to give me in return? 2,500 more healthcare professionals, 1,700 more RNs, 1,000 new LPNs, and 800 new CNAs. And that'll be yearly after 2028. To me, it sounds like a wonderful investment. These are where our 23 community colleges are located. You can see there's only one that does not have a nursing program. So why give the money to the VCCS? Why not to a four-year school? Why to the VCCS? Well, the Virginia Community College system offers the least costly healthcare degree for RN. Now, granted, it's a two-year program, and many of our students go on to get their bachelor's of science in nursing, but it is not required to practice in the field. And remember, we are now facing a dire shortage. So getting the students out as practicing professionals is imperative. So the time in the program is less, and the cost is about a third of what it is at a four-year institution. The other thing that's really exciting for community college students is when they move to a four-year institution, they can take 90 credits with them from the community college and only have to take 30 at the upper level institution. Again, a huge cost savings for our hospitals and our students, for sure. Locations, like I told you before, they're across the state of Virginia. There's one conveniently located to any citizen who might want to become a nurse. What is your return on investment? Well, I'm happy to tell you that of students attending community colleges, 84% of them continue to work in their home locality. So you don't have to worry about them saying, oh, I'm done. I went to UVA, so no smash on UVA. I love it. I went to UVA, but now I'm going to go and live in California, right? That doesn't usually happen at the community college. The students stay right at home. The other thing that's really important to know about the situation is that, in fact, we have more applicants to nursing programs than we can accept. So often we can say we'll take 120 and we have 200 applicants. So we have 80 students who want to be a nurse and want to help solve this crisis, but we have no way to admit them because we have reached the capacity of our programs. So in summary, I just want to, first of all, thank you for your attention and let you know that the shortage is at crisis proportion. The solution statewide is to honor the VCCS ask of $26.6 million. We are somewhat afraid that this may not even make it into the governor's budget. So we're hoping that you will support us there as well. And the payoff, remember, is the 2,500 new healthcare providers starting in 2028 that will be available to our state. So thank you for your time and your attention and for all that you do for us in the Commonwealth. I'll be willing to take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Lisk. I will open it up to our legislators. If you'll stop sharing your screen, be able to call on them. Do any of our legislators have any questions for Dr. Lisk? All right, I think she covered everything there pretty well. And Dr. Lisk,
Or else they're tired.
I also want to point out that at the hospital Culpeper Hospital Auxiliary last night at the Lights of Love, they announced an endowment for a scholarship for Germanna Community College.
Wasn't that wonderful?
Oh, that was incredible. That was a very
wonderful thing.
So that's going to be the legacy of the Culpeper Hospital Auxiliary Pink Ladies and Pink Gentlemen, that they will now have a scholarship endowment for Germanna.
Absolutely. Yes, that was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for our students and one that will carry on in the community for years to come. Like I said, they were likely to work there. In fact, after the ceremony last night, one of my old students came up to talk to me, and she had received one of the first scholarships that was given by the hospital auxiliary and came to Germanna. And she is still working in your area. So yeah, great thing.
That's incredible. Well, thank you again, Dr. Lisk. I will now open it up to our legislators. If they have any closing remarks, I will begin with Senator Jill Vogel because I see her first on my screen. Senator Vogel, do you have any remarks to share with us?
Good morning, everybody. I appreciate the presentation, and I would just say that I also appreciate the comprehensive document you gave us all as we're getting ready for session, and I don't have anything else to add. except we have a lot ahead of us, and I think it's all been said. I don't want to add any more minutes to everybody's morning, but I'm really grateful. And there may be some people I'll follow up with separately, maybe Jim in particular, on some of the issues he talked about, because there are so many issues that touch on his presentation that I'm dealing with constituent matters. And it goes probably deeper than anybody wants to talk about on this Zoom, but I will say I'm super appreciative for everybody's in-depth presentation.
Thank you, Senator Vogel. Delegate Liebert, do you have any closing remarks?
All right, can you hear me? Sorry. Well, first of all, thank you everybody for the presentations. They were educational, and obviously we had some pretty good questions and conversation in regards to that. Obviously, funding is always an issue whenever we talk about these things, but there's a couple of things that I think that came about that, at least for me, were pretty educational, and also things that we can work on. Jim's presentation in regards to the CSBs and all that. I will say that I'm fully behind some of that, because I myself and some family members of mine have experienced some of the issues in regards to particularly with the behavioral and mental health aspects here in Fauquier and Culpeper. I mean, we have a dire need for some of these things, and COVID has actually made that incredibly much more pronounced. And I think COVID has made a lot of things much more pronounced, and also brought some things to light on how things are being done that are going to bring about some real conversations in the General Assembly session moving forward. A couple of pieces of legislation that we're working on, Nick alluded to it earlier, with the red tape in regards to regulations and regulatory structures in the Commonwealth. I think over the last 2 years, personally, the regulatory structures and some of the huge issues that have been put forward over the last 2 years are reasons why North Carolina got Toyota, and why Texas gets some of these things, and why, I mean, it's not just an infrastructure issue. We have huge regulatory burden in the Commonwealth. It is much, much bigger, and is going to get much, much bigger. You know, July 1 was only the beginning, and there are things that were passed that are going to take effect 2 or 3 years from now, and it's only going to add to that. And so we're working on actually taking that back. You know, we passed the largest regulatory reform a couple of years ago in regards to occupational licensing. This year, we're going to try and take it statewide. And so we have a couple of pieces of legislation in regards to that. In regards to the community colleges, we're working with Lord Fairfax now, in order for them to utilize an LLC to be a sole proprietor of the LLC, and also still have the same tax preferences as some of the other nonprofits. And so, you know, we're working on a number of different things moving forward. In regards to Brent's presentation for the Friends of the Rappahannock, TMDL and WIP and all that funding is actually going to be very vital over the next 4 years. It's going to be a huge issue. And I think fully funding is 138. I think we did 100, 120 this year, last year. And Senator Hanger would probably know that figure off the top of his head, because he's you know, he and Senator Vogel are pretty tied to the finance of the state. But that's always been an issue for me, and something that we've constantly pushed. One of the things that I think we also need to look at, though, too, is also solar. Solar is the biggess leader of deforestation in the Commonwealth right now. We need to be able to approach that in a meaningful manner, because while, you know, going carbonless, also providing, you know, those types of things are admirable, and it's something that we all should be shooting for. I mean, we should be shooting for a cleaner source of energy. It's just how you go about doing that. And in the Commonwealth here, and particularly in the Piedmont, you know, I have major issue with losing prime farmland. I have major issue with losing prime viewshed to a solar facility, so that we can, you know, be more green. Because, I mean, quite frankly, I don't like staring at solar panels. I'd rather look at cows when I'm looking out my back window. And so how we go about that's going to be an interesting conversation. We were working with some other environmental groups we're going to be putting forward some legislation on that to have that meaningful discussion. And how do we do that? And how do we be carbonless and still, protect our environment itself, the actual natural resources that we've got, our trees, our canopy, and all that. So those are things that we're working on. And again, with Jim and with some of the workforce stuff that was presented, that Brian put forward. I mean, there's lots of great things here that we'll be able to work on, and I look forward to getting some of this stuff done.
Thank you, Delegate Weaver, and appreciate your time. Delegate Freitas, do you have any final closing comments?
Just want to thank everybody again for the presentations. I want to thank you to the Chamber for hosting. Look forward to speaking to everybody as the various legislation that affects the issues that we've discussed today comes to our offices, and look forward to hearing your perspective on them. I would just echo what Mike had to say. There's some legislation over the last 2 years that I think has been problematic that we're probably going to address. But I also want to see to be able to continue on some things and some trends that we've done over the last several years, to include the last two. And again, things like expanding scope of practice, increasing access to telemedicine, occupational licensing reform. I think all of these are going to be hugely beneficial. There's going to be a lot on the education front this time around. So I look forward to getting feedback on that. With respect to community colleges, we carried some legislation a couple years back, and we can't quite, the last 2 years, we haven't been able to get through any of the subcommittees, but we're going to try it again. And that's when it comes to the funding for higher education. We want there to be greater emphasis on the certification training that goes on with a lot of our community colleges. And we think that has, that should be prioritized every bit as much as some of the four-year degree plans that we see. So there's going to be a lot of things to work on. Again, look forward to working with you all during session, and thank you again to the Chamber for hosting.
Delegate Freitas, thank you once again for your time. And we'll finish with Senator Emmett Hanger. Senator Hanger, do you have any final closing comments?
Yes, well, certainly, thank you all. Thank the Chamber for doing this and all the presenters. I really do like the format that y'all use down there because, a lot of times the other chambers, they give us free rein to express our political views, and y'all basically provide us a lot of good information. I was handicapped a little bit this morning because I've been on the road to a meeting in Richmond the whole time, so wasn't able to take notes. So if I could get some copies forwarded to my office of some of the presentations, that would be helpful. I won't get into a lot of detail, but if we go back to specifically behavioral health, that's an area that I intend to work in quite a bit this year. One of the drawbacks we've had is not having consistent funding in that area. We adopted a program called STEP Virginia a few years back, and COVID interrupted our funding streams as we were moving forward with that. But I totally agree, and it's one of my goals certainly to tip the balance back toward community-based services as opposed to the institutional setting that we have. It's not an easy task, but it's one that I think we can accomplish. And the Marcus alert system, in my opinion, needs to be folded into STEP Virginia because we already have, as Jim alluded to, the framework in place. Significant amount of funding needs to go toward our efforts to clean up our watersheds statewide. Fortunately, we're in a position now where I think we can handle that. Upwards of $100 million each year over the next 4 or 5 years is what we need in that area. The other point that I would make in terms of the economics of the area is that we need additional job training programs that are targeted for existing jobs. The outgoing governor and the incoming governor both have talked about they want to create all these additional new jobs. Well, what we need more desperately, I think, are training programs to train people for existing vacancies that we currently have. And the example that was cited there in your presentation for the Goodwill program, where it puts someone on the ladder for upward mobility. There are a lot of people who are underemployed, need training so that they can advance, support their families adequately. And many of those individuals are currently like we have expanded Medicaid. Some of those people are actually, many of them are in positions where if we help them get ahead a little bit, give them a hand up, they'll be able to basically better provide for themselves and their families. So a lot to work on this year. And again, I thank you all for the opportunity to participate.
Well, thank you, Senator Hanger, and thank you to all of our participants, our legislators, our panelists, our attendees. Thank you for your time today. It was extremely educational. I certainly learned something, and I'm hoping everybody learned something as well. We appreciate you all joining us today. We appreciate our sponsors, our signature sponsor, Germanna Community College, and our event sponsors, Culpeper Media Network and the Culpeper Star Exponent. Thank you all once again for joining us. We look forward to your work in the coming year, and we look forward to be able to continue to connect our community. Happy holidays, everyone.